feel like a lot of people don't know how many great things that Ball State offers, and being a Ball State student to me has meant taking advantage of those opportunities and really shaping my own future.
Ball State provides its students with a wonderful opportunity to grow.
Ball State has shaped me to be a person that can be a leader. I'm able to work as a team player with other people around me in my major.
I think Ball State has shaped me in just pushing me out of my comfort zone completely. I'm more confident in my work, and I'm actually proud of the work that I'm doing.
Going to college is the first big, important step in any young man, young woman's life, because it's the first genuine step toward independence. And that's exactly what it was for me. And Ball State provided everything that I needed for that.
2018 marks the 100-year anniversary of Ball State University. From a humble beginning in a single building, Ball State expanded to 731 acres and 109 buildings. Each year, over 22,000 students study in 190 majors and 130 minors. Our humble origins begin during the late Victorian era at the height of an East Central Indiana gas and oil boom. Initially created to provide instruction in primary and secondary education, early curriculum sought to prepare Indiana's residents for the classroom, training a new generation of teachers in the state of Indiana. Before the Ball families purchased the school and donated it to the state of Indiana in 1918, the school had its roots in a one-building private facility, which was initially founded in 1899. In time, we evolved to a teachers' college in the 1920s centered on the Old Quad. Throughout the 20th century, Ball State evolved from a regional school committed to training teachers for the classroom to an institution that prepared students for the next century. Today, Ball State remains committed to educating students in many professional, scholarly, and academic disciplines. The hallmark of Ball State's curriculum rests upon innovative education, engaging students within the broader community of Indiana while always progressing toward a brighter future in the years to come.
What's exciting to me about the centennial is it really gives us an opportunity to do two things simultaneously. One is to celebrate our past achievements, and I think it's important during this centennial to celebrate the contributions of so many women and men who have made this a very special and distinctive university. But it also gives us a chance to reflect and to prepare for what the next century will bring.
While we celebrate our 100th anniversary in 2018, our university's roots actually began in 1899 during a gas and oil boom in Indiana. This boom transformed East Central Indiana from an agricultural backwater to a regional capital of the Second Industrial Revolution.
The discovery of natural gas in eastern Indiana and in the region immediately surrounding Muncie really almost transformed the city overnight. It was a dramatic shift. The access to essentially free or very cheap fuel attracted businesses to the area. It made it a very desirable place to set up a manufacturing operation because of this access to cheap gas. And it drew not only investors and businessmen, but it also drew large numbers of workers.
Many companies migrated to East Central Indiana, taking advantage of the newfound energy resource. Muncie's civic and business boosters actively sought out manufacturers for relocation. One of the largest companies to move to Muncie was the Ball Brothers Glass Manufacturing Company of Buffalo, New York. A team of Muncie business leaders, including James Boyce and George McCulloch, offered the Ball brothers free natural gas for 5 years, 3 acres of land, and $5,000 on condition that they establish a factory in Muncie and employ 125 people.
The deal to get them here included free land. It was approximately 7 acres on the southeast side of Muncie. It included access to free natural gas. It included cash, and it included a railroad spur so that it was easy for them to ship their product out. It was a sweet deal. They did well.
The 5 Ball brothers, Lucius, William, Edmund, Frank, and George, all eventually moved to Muncie with their families. In time, their manufacturing operations employed thousands of residents and produced millions of fruit jars, becoming a leader in national glass manufacturing.
Ball Brothers had built a successful business in their glass manufacturing company, and they wanted to have Muncie be a really great place for manufacturing, for other types of jobs, and also for education.
The Ball Brothers matched their economic influence in Muncie with civic, cultural, and nonprofit contributions in a philosophy of beneficence, a family credo that eventually led to the creation of Ball State University. The Ball Brothers and their families sought to improve the quality of life in Muncie, Delaware County, and East Central Indiana with charitable contributions. This philanthropic dedication continues to this day.
Their philosophy of philanthropy was dive in, make things better.
As Muncie grew, civic leaders, including members of the Ball family, saw a need to establish an institution of higher education in Muncie, in part to foster growth and innovation in teaching, and also to improve development in Muncie's West Side neighborhoods.
The drive for higher education in Muncie is initially an entrepreneurial business idea. So they want to create this college, which is going to be an incentive for people to come out and build homes and build neighborhoods.
Frank and Edmund Ball especially saw the need to provide advanced education in East Central Indiana. 3 Muncie businessmen led the charge to establish a college: George Higman, a teacher and real estate developer, Frank Haimbaugh, a publisher, and George McCulloch, a publisher and streetcar industrialist. The 3 entrepreneurs worked together to establish a normal school, an institution designed to train teachers for elementary education. They were called normal after the French system of École Normale. In 1896, the 3 established the Eastern Indiana Normal University Association and began raising money for a facility in the new West Side addition northwest of Muncie.
The people of Muncie were very determined to have a higher education institution in their community. The city transformed during the late 19th century and really emerged as an urban place as opposed to a small farming town, essentially, and county seat. And so it had increasingly grand ambitions. It had ambitions of being a significant urban center, a significant community, both in terms of size and also in terms of its cultural character.
Construction began in 1898 for the Eastern Indiana Normal University building and was completed by August of 1899. Over the next 19 years, several private institutions, all precursors to Ball State, operated out of a single building, in what would later become the Frank Bracken Administration Building. However, none of these early precursors lasted long. The Eastern Indiana Normal University closed in 1901 as both funding and students were lacking. In 1902, the New York philanthropist Francis Palmer offered a $100,000 endowment donation on condition that Muncie matched the fund. The school, the second precursor to Ball State, reopened as Palmer University in 1902. However, the money never materialized and Francis Palmer died that November. Palmer University, like Eastern Indiana Normal, closed in 1904. In 1905, the school reopened as the Indiana Normal School and College of Applied Science under the direction of Francis Engler and James McCormick. This third iteration closed as well in 1907. Muncie stakeholders, including the Ball families, began lobbying the Indiana General Assembly to take over the school and operate it as a public college. These efforts floundered and the building sat empty until 1912, when a 4th institution went into operation under Michael Kelly. Kelly purchased the Marion Normal and Business College from Marion, Indiana, the National Manual Training Corporation, and the Muncie Conservatory of Music in 1911. He renamed the new school the Muncie Normal Institute. Kelly's acquisitions left this school bankrupt almost at the outset. After a sizable donation from a Chicago philanthropist, the school was reorganized as Muncie National Institute in 1915. Like its predecessors, the Muncie National Institute closed in 1917 due to a lack of consistent funding and students. The failure of this last iteration prompted direct involvement from the Ball families.
The Ball brothers ended up getting the property. The family tried to give the property to the state to take over as a college, and the state did not want it. So they put together some incentives. There was $1 million in cash plus the property that they had bid on and successfully acquired. That eventually got the state's attention.
Frank and Edmund worked out a deal with the state of Indiana to donate the facility for use as a branch campus of the Indiana State Normal School in Terre Haute. After some initial reluctance, the trustees at Indiana State agreed, and the Eastern Division of the Indiana State Normal School began operation in spring 1918. After 4 unsuccessful early iterations, Muncie finally had an institution of higher education, and the history of Ball State began.
This was not just a question of educational access, it was also a question of equity. East Central Indiana, or Central Indiana, however you want to geographically look at it, had every right to expect that the state would invest in higher education here, just as it had in other places.
During the 1920s, the Eastern Division initiated many of the academic programs and institutional elements that became hallmarks of the school throughout the 20th century.
Here's where Ball State really had to make it. It had to make it as a branch campus, but it still had to establish a footing that would enable it to survive into the 30s. Nobody knew the Depression was coming, for example.
The school's first 2 presidents, William Parsons and Linnaeus Hines, operated out of the main campus in Terre Haute. Classes began in June of 1918 with an enrollment of about 400 students. The Eastern Division's first term commenced in the summer of 1918. President Parsons moved several faculty from the Terre Haute campus to Muncie.
And one of the things that really helped was, unfortunately, for a lot of things, World War I. The state normal school enrollment had dropped significantly. All the men were drafted. This looked like it was going to be a long war. It had already been 4 or 5 years, and in 1918 could drag on forever. And so they viewed it as a place they could temporarily store some faculty. They had a lot of faculty, but they could move them to Muncie to teach, thinking this probably would not gain much foothold in that time. And as soon as this was over, they could move them back to the main campus, and whatever happens, happened.
In keeping with the original mission of teacher preparation and education, the Eastern Division offered educational programs in pedagogy, the arts, science, teaching licensing, and public school licensing. Tuition was $7.50 per semester, which is about $125 today.
We had the large push from Muncie, from the Ball brothers and others, to create an institution of higher education here. And the thought would be that if we wanted us to become eventually a major institution, a lot of things had to happen.
In that first year, the Eastern Division worked to establish not only the school's credibility as an institution of higher education, but also as a financially viable operation. However, with the onset of the Spanish flu in 1918, enrollment dropped significantly that fall to 160 students.
Well, we opened in 1918, I guess, with about 340 students that first June. By mid-year, it dropped in half, and then it went back up.
In the fall semester of 1919, enrollment increased to almost 500 students. Parsons aggressively hired faculty to match the expanding student population. The Eastern Division's first class graduated at a June 13, 1919 commencement. The first speakers included Dr. S.L. Burr, Jacob Sherman, the president of Cornell University, Indiana's governor, James P. Goodrich, and Frank Ball. To honor the contributions of the Ball family, school officials presented a plaque memorializing the brothers' assistance in bringing the school to life.
They, the Ball brothers, understood at the very outset that strong people make strong families, and strong families make strong communities, and strong communities make strong companies. And they got that from day one, and they were people-purposed.
President Parsons retired in 1921, passing administration of both campuses to Linnaeus Hines. Hines, along with Frank Ball, began seeking funds to construct a science building.
So in kind of rapid order, the leadership of Indiana State manages to acquire funding for what is now the Burkhart building, but it was originally Science Hall, so now you have a classroom building. But then what comes on is Ball Gym, and that's huge, because now you don't just have a facility for training gym teachers, but now you can have an athletic program. An athletic program means publicity. People are going to pay attention. So then comes the Library and Assembly Hall, which is now North Quad. But then about the same time also comes Lucina Hall, the Women's Residence Hall, named after the Ball brothers' oldest sister, Lucina. And that also is almost equally huge, because now the school can say to its prospective students, especially if they're female, its women's residence hall. Come here, it's safe. It's not just the acquisition of the property, it's also the building of Lucina Hall and Ball Gym that by the end of the 20s gives Ball State the facilities really that's when the quad takes shape.
The Eastern Division's enrollment substantially grew during these early years, from over 400 students in the fall of 1921 to almost 1,000 in the fall of 1925. In 1922, the Board of Trustees at Terre Haute renamed the Eastern Division as Ball Teachers College, Eastern Division, Indiana State Normal School, to reflect the importance of the Ball family at the satellite campus.
The Ball brothers partnered with the state, which kind of merged the interests of the state and the family, and I think that gave it, quite honestly, longevity. The family's interest continued because certain members of the family continued to live here, and as time went on, realized what an important investment Ball State was to the future of Muncie.
One of the Eastern Division's most prominent faculty members at the time, Lemuel Pittenger, persuaded the General Assembly to change the name. Pittenger was also instrumental in separating Ball Teachers College funding from the Indiana State Normal School in Terre Haute. After successfully being elected to the Indiana General Assembly, Pittenger worked to provide direct funding from the legislature to Ball Teachers College, although administrative ties remained in place with the parent campus at Terre Haute.
I tell my students this is how it happened. Grab your desk, you're about ready to have a nervous breakdown, I understand, with the realization that Ball State at one time started out as part of Indiana State, but you're all college students and you can handle it.
By 1924, Pittenger was successful, and the Ball Teachers College Eastern Division received funding directly from the state. Benjamin Burris served as the first president. Burris died suddenly in 1927, and the trustees in Terre Haute named Lemuel Pittenger as president of Ball Teachers College. Pittenger served as president until the Second World War and helped to establish Ball Teachers College as an independent, regional institution for education. In 1928, Pittenger sought to separate the Muncie campus from Terre Haute completely, turning to a local attorney to write House Bill 187, known as the Separation Bill. In late spring of '29, the General Assembly approved of HB 187, separating the Muncie and Terre Haute campuses. The Terre Haute campus was renamed Indiana State Teachers College, and the Muncie campus became Ball State Teachers College, although the Indiana State Teachers College Board of Trustees governed both schools until 1961.
One thing that happened, the family had to give up here as far as the Ball family and the Muncie community people, was that this would not be independent. We would be under what was then the Indiana Normal School Board, their Board of Trustees, and we would be under their president as a campus, and they would call us a branch campus. Then we eventually became the Eastern Division, and then eventually they changed us in '21 to what was then Ball Teachers College, Eastern Division, Indiana State Normal School. And then in 1929 finally released us totally as Ball State Teachers College in recognition of the family. However, we still had the same Board of Trustees.
By the end of the decade, Ball State Teachers College emerged as an independent institution, established to train teachers in primary and secondary education. By 1930, enrollment increased to 1,000 students, with an additional 1,000 students enrolled in extension programs. Ball State also created the Burris Laboratory School in 1929, which served as a teacher training facility for the students at Ball State. In 1930, Ball State became accredited by the North Central Board of Review, rendering the college a fully independent, accredited regional school for teacher training. From the Great Depression through the Second World War and on to the post-war boom, Ball State Teachers College transformed significantly by enrolling more students and offering new programs. The Depression forced Ball State into economic hardship, which turned into severe budget cuts. Ball State operated with a $686,000 budget in 1929. By 1936, the budget had reduced to just over $500,000.
Hard times come in the 1930s. The Depression, slashes the appropriation. Faculty salaries need to be cut. Expenses need to be watched very carefully. But still, by comparison with what you had in 1920, which was one building and a bunch of, fields, now you can say, aha, there's the campus.
Ball State continued to serve as a regional campus during the 1930s, attracting students from all over East Central Indiana who wished to become teachers. Enrollment kept steady at about 1,200 students throughout the decade. In the early 30s, Ball State operated with 12 departments, including education, industrial arts, art, commerce, English, physical education, science, home economics, mathematics, foreign language, library science, and social science.
A nursing program is started in the 1930s, which complements the teachers program. That raised a few eyebrows. What's a teachers college doing with a nursing school or a nursing department? But really what it came down to was a bit of this, shall we say, entrepreneurial tradition that marked Ball State from the beginning. Why should we not have a program for nurses when the hospital's right across the street?
Despite the Depression, Ball State added the Arts Building in 1935. It cost $450,000 in construction. Funding came from the Indiana General Assembly, the federal government, and Frank Ball. Sitting at the north end of the quad, the Arts Building Terrace has served as a location for spring commencement since the 1930s. In 1938, with funding from Frank Ball, Ball State Teachers College opened Elliott Hall on the south end of campus. Serving as the first men's dormitory at Ball State, Elliott was named in honor of Frank Elliott Ball, son of Frank Clayton Ball, who died in a plane crash in 1936.
Elliott Hall at Ball State was built as a memorial to Frank Elliott. Frank Elliott had graduated from Princeton. The story goes that the design of Elliott Hall was based on designs of some of the dormitories at Princeton University. And if you look at pictures, you can see the resemblance.
The Frank and Edmund Ball families had consistently supported the college in the early decades, but also many other institutions in the city of Muncie. To honor the family's contributions and community investment, the Muncie Chamber of Commerce commissioned the beneficence statue from the renowned sculptor Daniel Chester French. French created several statues around the United States, including President Lincoln at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C.
But he was retired. He was contacted about creating this statue. He didn't need this work. But what happened next then was that a coalition of the townspeople went out to his studio in New York City and told Mr. French the story of the Ball brothers and how they came here and built the business and gave much of the money back, invested it into the community in various ways. Ball State was only one. Part of that story must have resonated with Mr. French because he was persuaded.
Remarkably, the citizens of Muncie raised the funds to build the statue during the hardest years of the Great Depression. Officially dedicated in September of 1937, beneficence honored the Ball family's dedication to the community, residents, and institutions of Muncie. Although designed as a monument by the city of Muncie, the proximity to campus allowed beneficence to become an icon for Ball State, eventually serving as the logo.
The Ball family has always believed in hard work, teamwork, and doing things so that they're built to last. And those are the types of things they took into their business. Those are the things that they transferred into how they looked at the community and trying to help society. They really thought working together was extremely important. They thought giving back to a community that had been so good to them was extremely important.
Ball State's athletic programs also grew considerably in the 1930s. Ball State fielded teams almost immediately after the campus opened in the 1920s. For most of that decade, Paul "Billy" Williams coached the football, basketball, and baseball teams, while simultaneously serving as the athletic director. In those early years, the teams were referred to as Hoosieroons and played other colleges in Indiana. In 1927, the Hoosieroons became the Cardinals, to contrast with the Hoosiers in Bloomington. In the 1930s, Williams hired Branch McCracken to coach basketball, John Magnabosco to coach football, and Williams remained the coach for the baseball team. Reflecting sexist attitudes of the day, the majority of resources for the early athletic programs existed mostly for male students. However, early pioneers at Ball State sought equal opportunities for the college's female students. Grace Woody, Ball State's women's physical education director, created the Women's Athletic Association, which offered athletic opportunities for Ball State's female students. Student enrollment had grown steadily during the 1930s. However, the onset of the Second World War changed life on campus. In 1942, enrollment dropped significantly as students left college to fight the war or support the war effort at home.
The war affected Ball State just about the way it affected every other college and university in the United States. It took college-age men out of the equation. If you were in that, shall we say, that draftable age, right about then, and you wanted to go to college, your service in World War II was going to take place first. That was going to be the priority. And once the war was over with and you were released, you were discharged, go ahead and pursue your education. Either continue your education or start from scratch. An entirely new world. And it comes on very, very fast.
At the onset of the war, President Pittenger retired, and the trustees hired Winfred Wagoner, Ball State's business manager, as acting president. Wagoner carefully guided the college during the war to maintain the educational commitment, but also to provide support for the war effort. Wagoner created two programs, the Army's Specialized Training Program and the Navy's Cadet Aviator Program. Both measures prepared thousands for the war, including 1,200 pilots that served overseas. By the end of the war, 48 Ball State alumni lost their lives fighting. In May of 1945, the Board of Trustees hired John Emmons, the personnel director for Michigan's public schools, as Ball State's 6th president. Emmons went on to lead Ball State for 22 years, implementing numerous changes and guiding the campus through the post-war boom years. Emmons intended to make Ball State a campus of the future and opened many new buildings, expanded academic programs, and enrolled thousands of new students.
If you knew John Emmons, he was a very visionary man, knew exactly what he wanted to do, what vision he had for this campus was for it to grow, become America's finest teachers college, recognized with Columbia and those types of things. He wanted a family institution. He talked to every student on the campus when he walked across the thing. He was just very outgoing, but also had very clear where he wanted to go.
So his forte is teacher education. Well, when the war ends and you have this great influx of students, I think what happened here was you don't have time to do a lot of experimentation. You have to deal with reality. You have to find housing for these students because the housing capacity of the school is going to surpass the existing facilities. You're going to have to hire new faculty. They're going to have to be trained in the disciplines. It's an entirely new world, and it comes on very, very fast.
The influx of veterans and eventually their baby boomer children provided both opportunity and challenges at Ball State. In response, the college entered a period of rapid construction and expansion, including the development of several residence halls. Woodworth, Wagoner, Doherty, Neuer, Studebaker, and La Follette all came into being in the post-war decades.
I'm sure this was a great challenge for Emmons to sustain the institution after World War II because of the growth that was taking place. Fortunately, Emmons was not short on energy. And he wasn't short on ideas, and he had the forceful personality of a determined leader, so he was up to it.
Emmons saw a need to expand the physical space of campus given the increase in student enrollment. Expanding north from the original quad, Ball State added several new buildings in the 1950s, 1960s, and early 1970s, including the Applied Technology Building, the Arts and Communication Building, Hargraves Music Building, Emmons Auditorium, the Cooper Science Building, Schumann Stadium, Llewellyn Pool, and the Teachers College.
Probably his crowning achievement was when he built Emmons Auditorium. People never thought that would happen, and he was able to organize the thing to do it. In fact, if anyone ever looked very carefully, it's always amazing people did not discover that when I was a student, you had an English building, the side towards Woodworth, and then you had the music building, and across the back was a little theater. There's this giant hill down in the middle, and these 3 stories of brick walls. Well, at that point, the state would not fund non-academic spaces, and an auditorium would be a non-academic space. But he now had 3 walls of it built. Specifically, it's a hole. People ask, well, yes, what's this giant hole going to be for eventually here? And then that's the reason it only cost about, what, $1.6 million or something like this. And because he had figured out a way to get a lot of it paid for through the academic buildings being constructed around it.
In the 1950s, Ball State began offering new programs along with the core commitment to teacher education, including pre-law, pre-medicine, music, social science, printing technology, and international studies. As teacher education and training continued to grow, Ball State redefined the mission to allow students with different ambitions to pursue essential skills and understandings and to realize the attitudes, ideals, and values basic to moral and democratic living.
But then during the 50s, we expanded that into doctoral programs, and we started out by entering into agreements with Indiana University and Purdue University to do joint programs. Then we found other areas that we could offer a master's degree in that would be non-teaching, but yet obviously more of importance to students we were recruiting and trying to graduate with credentials they could get work in their field.
In the 1950s, Ball State's graduate program was almost 20 years old. By the 1960s, enrollment in graduate education more than doubled.
John Emmons was told by the leaders of the General Assembly that once Ball State got to 10,000 student population, it could become a university.
By the end of the 1960s, Ball State transitioned from a college to a university, with several new academic colleges, thousands of students, and new programs, facilities, and faculty. In 1961, a separate board of trustees was established for Ball State Teachers College, separating governance from Indiana State. The school's name was shortened to just Ball State College. The growth in programs by way of academic departments created this need for expansion. In 1962, almost 20% of Ball State students took classes outside of teacher training. The growth of students, programs, buildings, and majors allowed for Ball State to transition from a college to a university.
Ball State Teachers College became Ball State University in 1965. And before that time, it was really truly focused primarily on teacher preparation, but it had already branched out to a number of significant areas beyond teaching.
In early 1965, the Indiana General Assembly passed House Bill 1014.
The bill started in the House, and the representative was a man by the name of David Metzger. Well, it passed the House. I believe the vote was 94-3. I don't know who would have voted against making Ball State a university, but there were 3 votes in opposition. Then it went over to the Senate. Vote that I saw there just said it passed. So maybe that was unanimous.
With Governor Brannigan's signature, Ball State College became Ball State University.
I was in the first class to graduate from Ball State University, and I remember when they took the Teachers College sign down and put up the university sign. As students, we felt that was really significant, and we're really proud of that.
Now you're going to have, instead of a college with a bunch of academic departments, you're going to have a university with 5 or so separate colleges, each of whom is going to have its own administration and each of whom is going to have its own faculty.
After transitioning to a university, Ball State reorganized and created the College of Architecture and Planning and the Miller College of Business. Other programs were organized into the College of Fine Arts, the College of Science and Humanities, the College of Applied Sciences and Technology, and the Bedrock Teachers College. The Center for Radio and Television began in 1966, which eventually evolved into the College of Communication, Information, and Media. The Honors Program, which began in 1959, grew significantly in the years following university status, eventually becoming another Ball State academic college in the 1970s.
So now the challenge, of course, is to start becoming a university rather than simply a teacher's college that tries to function like a university.
In 1965, Ball State added the Human Performance Lab to research exercise physiology. The Human Performance Lab has achieved national recognition in their research efforts. During this same era, Ball State students became increasingly concerned about social issues in the Vietnam War.
If you flunked out, you were going to Vietnam. And I can remember when I graduated, I lost my student deferment and went down for my pre-induction physical. And it's one of those odd circumstances because you know millions before you have fulfilled their military obligation, but as you're going through that physical, you're saying to yourself, geez, I hope they find a lump. But they don't find a lump, and so you're reclassified. You lose your student deferment, and I went home and they just said, all right, we'll call you when it's time to go. And what intervened in my near future, and I think made a difference in my life, because we know going there for millions and millions of men and women made a huge difference in their life, not for the better. The intervention of the lottery system. And I sat there on the couch the night they drew the birth dates to see who was going to be drafted before they ended the draft, and mine was 352nd out of 356. So I was very, very lucky in that sense, because I would not have, if I knew kids in my fraternity who went and didn't come back. I knew everybody has stories like that. They're, for Christ's sake, go to Washington and look at the Vietnam War wall. So I wouldn't have been the same if I came back. So I was very, very lucky there.
In addition to the Vietnam War, students and faculty began criticizing off-campus landlords' discriminatory housing policies in the early 1960s.
It was an entirely different kind of environment than we live in today. Racial discrimination was a pattern and practice that occurred everywhere. I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma things were totally segregated. So when I arrived at Ball State, I was informed that there were no rooms in the dorms and that I would have to seek housing off campus. And very nicely, someone in the housing office took back the full 3 or 4 page list of off-campus housings and gave me a 1-sheet piece of paper and said, Mr. Hughes, here, you need to take this, because if you go to the others that are close to campus, you're probably going to get embarrassed and have a tough time.
During this time period, the Black Student Union was formed, advocating for courses in African American studies, equality in off-campus housing, and diversity in fraternities and sororities.
With the passage of the Civil Rights Bill in '65, things just began to change within the country. There was a lot more militancy, a lot more pushback. In the '60s, those patterns were just there and pretty much accepted. As I said, the pattern not only was landlords, but the university policy at that time was if you didn't come with the recommendation for a black roommate, they would not assign an African American and a white student to the same room.
In May of 1970, Ball State's Student Senate voted to strike on the 7th of that month to protest the U.S. invasion of Cambodia and the shootings at Kent State. Ball State athletics changed too. In the 1950s and 60s, student athletic teams competed in the Indiana Collegiate Conference against Indiana State, Butler, Valparaiso, St. Joseph's College, and DePauw. But in 1973, Ball State joined the Mid-American Conference to compete against Bowling Green, Kent State, Miami, Ohio, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Toledo, and Western Michigan. With the passage of Title IX in 1972, women's sports increased significantly at Ball State, with competitive teams in volleyball and field hockey. By joining the MAC, Ball State became recognized as a school on par with several prominent Midwestern universities.
And it was an athletic conference. It was really nothing more than an athletic conference. There's never been, programs that are across state lines with the MAC schools in Ohio or Michigan or Northern Illinois and the state of Illinois. It was entirely an athletic conference. And yet it brought faculty into contact with other faculty who were more like what you would say university faculty are like. So that was an important part of being a member of the Mid-American Conference as well.
President Emmons retired in 1968 after 22 years of service. Under his guidance, Ball State radically changed from a small regional teacher education college to a major state university. Over 17,000 students attended Ball State annually in the late 1960s. The university faculty refocused on education, research, and service. After President Emmons' retirement, the Board of Trustees hired the Vice President for Administration at Western Michigan University, John Pruce, as the next president. Preuss led the continued expansion of Ball State University, the most significant of which was the addition of Bracken Library in 1975.
There's a lot of controversy during that time. He took over from Emmons, was trying to move the university forward. He had inherited a brand new university, so it was an important one. They had to enhance the faculty, they had to find more people with doctoral degrees, more diverse backgrounds, and had to encourage more research, had to expand programs.
The transition to a university greatly improved the educational experience at Ball State. In the year before the transition, only 16% of students received non-teaching related degrees. By 1975, 42% of undergraduates graduated from a non-teaching program. In 1981, 89% of all students graduated in non-teaching programs. Ball State, while maintaining its commitment to teacher training, had become an institution of higher education committed to so much more.
What I found through my experience at Ball State was that we were more alike than we were different. I found professors that helped me personally to deal with whatever problems I was having with, to find my way and to grow.
The post-war era brought many rapid changes. This growth brought about a time of instability in the late 1970s and early 1980s. The trouble began in December of 1977 when the University Senate voted no confidence in President John Preuss. Preuss resigned the following March, instituting a period of continuing divisiveness on campus, infighting, and struggle.
John Preuss, in some respects, had the misfortune of following John Emmons, who was widely applauded, widely respected, widely admired, widely loved, and all that. Any person that followed Jack Emmons, in my opinion, was going to face a handicap. There wasn't a year that Jack Emmons was president, probably, that enrollment didn't go up. When John Preuss becomes president, enrollment levels off.
You had a senior faculty who were the powers in the university senate, and they were people who were trying as much as they can to hold on to the old remnants of the reward system of a teacher's college.
And the 1970s were a bad decade for the national economy, not very good for Indiana's economy. And that means the level of funding also stabilizes off. It increases a little bit each year, but there's high inflation. Ball State just had to deal with a different set of circumstances because not that many students were coming to college.
And so you began to get significant changes where you would have situations where we're going to change the salary schedule. We're not going to have a salary schedule anymore. So if you had come to Ball State and I knew how many years you'd been here and what your academic rank was, to the penny on this grid salary schedule, I knew how much money you were making, much like a K-12 system. That began to change in the late 1970s. So you had a significant disconnect between the old guard faculty and President John Preuss, which ultimately led to the University Senate voting no confidence in him.
Following President Preuss's departure, Richard Burkhart served as interim president for 1 year. The Board of Trustees hired a series of presidents after Burkhart, including Jerry Anderson in 1979 and Robert Bell in 1981.
At that point, after Jerry Anderson leaves and Dr. Robert Bell becomes president with Dr. James Cook as the provost and vice president for academic affairs, you really begin to go full bore into changing the entire makeup of the way the faculty are going to be evaluated for tenure and evaluated for promotion to associate and full professor. And that was a real tug of war. And it probably lasted for about a decade until it began to really be formed and shaped out and led more toward what a university reward structure was like for the faculty.
Despite the challenges, Ball State remained committed to student-centered education. Enrollment in the fall of 1980 climbed to over 18,000 students. In March of 1981, the Ball State men's basketball team made it into the NCAA tournament after securing the MAC championship against Northern Illinois. The crises of the late 1970s and early 1980s began to turn around with the hiring of President John E. Worthen in 1984. Worthen, becoming Ball State's 11th president, led the university for 16 years, providing much-needed stability.
When I came to Ball State in 1984 as president, it seemed that the university was going through two transitions. First was we were still transitioning from being a very good teachers college, preparing students to teach in schools across the state, but we had added 5 additional colleges, and we were actually an institution that offered a variety of academic programs for students to study, but people hadn't really caught on to that.
We began to focus much more on trying to find what I would call the proper niche for Ball State in public education in the state of Indiana. And a lot of that was to try to focus a great deal, and I think quite accurately, on the catchphrase that you no doubt have heard up till now, our best teachers are in the classroom. And that was really true. And so the people here who were by far the best classroom teachers, they were in the classroom. They weren't off doing research someplace. They were doing research, but they weren't gone. They were teaching people like you.
Our trustees and our faculty wanted the people in Indiana, and particularly the General Assembly, to understand is that when they thought of public higher education, they wanted to hear that people were thinking of IU and Purdue and Ball State. We decided to give emphasis to the teaching side, particularly to differentiate the university from the great research universities of IU and Purdue.
So an undergraduate coming here as a freshman, sophomore, could pretty much expect to have the best classroom teachers on this campus teaching him or her in classroom laboratory settings. And that was an important thing that Dr. Worthen really championed, and the other senior academic leaders of the institution did as well. So that was a really important change in the lives of students on this campus. More importantly, I think it's said to the state legislature, the Commission for Higher Education, all of our alums, other constituencies off campus, this is the kind of institution we want to be.
President Worthen instituted a number of positive changes and reaffirmed Ball State's primary mission, which rested on student-centered education, innovative curriculum, and first-class facilities and resources.
Very early after I came, we began to lay the groundwork for developing 5-year capital campaigns, and we conducted the first one, really began about 1987, and then later we ran another 5-year campaign. And the purpose was to raise money for scholarships for students, to attract the best students from the state, and to have distinguished professorships. And also we raised some of the money for new buildings.
President Worthen oversaw construction and development of the Ball Communications Building with several state-of-the-art production facilities and the establishment of the Indiana Academy for Science, Mathematics, and Humanities.
We opened the Bell Building just after I came, and then we built the Ball Building, the arena, the Alumni Center, the Human Performance Lab.
By 1990, over 19,000 students attended Ball State University. As the decade began, Ball State admitted a student body with higher overall SAT scores and almost doubled the number of African American students from 1985 to 1993. Ball State athletics continued a streak of successes in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Men's basketball appeared in the NCAA tournament several times in 1986, 1989, 1990, 1993, and 1995. The Ball State football team appeared in the California Bowl in 1989 and in the Las Vegas Bowl twice, in 1993 and 1996. Ball State also made great progress in improving facilities and sidewalks for those with disabilities. Led by the Office of Disabled Student Development, the university added new technologies and academic opportunities.
We started out with improving physical access. You know, the international symbol of access, the wheelchair figure when you park and all that, unfortunately is a little limiting because you only think about wheelchairs. But we started one by one to make our buildings accessible, to put in curb ramps, to put in automatic doors, and to do all sorts of things for the physical access. Well, then the next step was technical access, particularly for persons who are blind. And we made some really nice inroads.
By the millennium, Ball State had reaffirmed its institutional commitment to student-centered education, continued to improve facilities, and initiated new programs, course offerings, and services to the student body. The stability and steady growth in the 1990s allowed for the university to embark upon a new direction in the 21st century.
One thing I've always been struck by is how innovative Ball State has been. We talked about the starting of new colleges and these programs within the colleges, such as the College of Communication, Information, and Media, are actually known for being responsive to the world around them and innovating and growing and changing. I think that tradition will continue because it seems to be somehow born in the DNA of Ball State.
The first 2 decades of the 21st century marked significant change and progress at Ball State University. The regional campus became a nationally recognized university, leading both the state and the Midwest in experiential education, community impact, and technology.
Ball State for years compared itself to other schools. It was always being compared to Purdue, to IU, occasionally to Notre Dame. It had to really go through some changes where it identified what its skills, talents, gifts were. And I think they have found that in that they're willing to reach out to others. People are attracted to what they will gain and not just a name.
In 2000, President Worthen retired and the Board of Trustees hired Blaine Brownell to serve as president. Under Brownell, the university's enrollment bounced back to historically high levels, and the university received a $20 million grant from the Lilly Endowment to conduct research on the design, creation, distribution, and effects on converging digital media.
And we were charged with finding ways to bring more immersive learning opportunities to our students. So it was through a set of funding opportunities that we had through the Lilly Endowment that started what we called the Business Fellows Program and the Center for Media Design, that we learned the lessons necessary to build the capacity on our campus and to develop the infrastructure to support immersive learning in a much larger way.
The 2000s also inaugurated a building boom that continues to this day. The Art and Journalism Building opened at the center of campus, followed by the Fisher Training Complex, the Schaefer Tower, the David Letterman Communication and Media Building, Park Hall, and Kinghorn Hall.
We worked hard to develop a strategic plan, but to implement a strategic plan, you frequently need resources because, in truth, every new idea requires new funds. And so we worked hard to raise the funds to support immersive learning, to raise the funds to support the development of new academic programs such as emerging media.
After President Brownell's departure, Provost Beverly Pitts served as interim president briefly in 2004. In that year, the Board of Trustees hired Dr. Joanne Gora as the 14th president of Ball State University. New construction matched with renovations of older structures, modernizing them for the next century, including a renovation of West Quad and the Fine Arts Building, Schumann Stadium, and several residence halls.
The growth of the campus is so impressive to me, and I believe, and I don't want to diminish the input of others, but I believe President Gora was largely responsible for the physical change that it underwent and the much higher profile it has now than when I was a student. So you see this burgeoning center of education, and you can't help but want to be a part of it.
Improvements were made to landscaping throughout the campus, and the entire length of McKinley Avenue was modified in the first half of the decade. Arguably the biggest construction undertaking is the geothermal energy system.
When it was completed, it was the largest closed-loop geothermal project in the country. It enabled us to provide heating and cooling to more than 46 campus buildings. It enabled us to save $2 million annually in operating funds and to cut our carbon footprint in 1/2.
President Gora served for 10 years and reaffirmed the university's commitment to community engagement and experiential learning.
I think through immersive learning, we were able to engage the community in ways that really had never been done before. And we were able to define community broadly. So we weren't talking only about Muncie, we were certainly talking about working with Muncie, with Muncie companies and with the Muncie community, but we were in Indianapolis, we were all over the state of Indiana, and we even had projects that took place in Italy, in Hong Kong, really all over the world.
The concept of immersive learning is being a really intense experiential learning requires that students get their hands on things. So immersive learning as a program was designed to give those students these intense experiences working with a variety of disciplines and real-world applications.
Experiential programs, also known as immersive learning, originated at the Virginia B. Ball Center for Creative Inquiry in the early 2000s.
The Virginia Ball Center, I think, is the tip of the spear for the immersive learning effort by the university. It's taken students through the seminars and being able to put them in a very immersive process where they're not even in regular classes, where they're doing something that has more exposure to the real world and what these students may get into after getting out of the university.
It is not an internship. It is a totally different experience than an internship. It is a unique opportunity for students to work in the kinds of environments that they will confront when they graduate from Ball State.
In addition to experiential learning, the faculty, staff, and students of Ball State University worked closely with many communities across the state of Indiana.
Ball State gave the city of Gary, the children, their first access to the internet. It was the CICS program that worked with me, that provided internet connectivity, that helped train staff members. We didn't charge them one penny. We got a grant from the government. We had graduate students who provided a lot of encouragement to others who live in the Gary area, some children, but quite a few professionals. And they thought, we can get this kind of training at Ball State? I think that's that way that the word kind of ekes out about what Ball State can offer a student, can offer a family. It's the fact that Ball State serves.
This commitment to Indiana continues Ball State's 100-year legacy of providing research, service, and support to the state's residents.
We have worked with literally thousands of organizations to try to solve real-world problems, and the students have been responsible for coming up with real-world solutions to those problems.
After Dr. Gore retired in the spring of 2014, the Board of Trustees hired Paul Ferguson as the 15th president of Ball State University. During his tenure, Ball State announced plans to create a new College of Health and obtained state funding for a $49 million College of Health building.
Well, the condition of our health in general is of paramount importance, and the quality of life. We're obviously living longer, but we face a lot of different challenges than we might have 10, 20, 30 years ago. Ball State to step forward and say, we got this. We're not just willing, but we're able to lead the charge, is answering a call higher than even its university mission.
After President Ferguson's resignation in early 2016, the university's provost, Terry King, served as interim president throughout most of 2016 and early 2017.
When I served as interim president, I had greater opportunities to work outside the campus. To a person, they all were appreciative of Ball State and all the things that had happened there. I also got to meet a lot of alumni that I would not have met otherwise. They all told stories about their experiences at Ball State, and those stories were always around their interactions with faculty members. The opportunity to work with somebody who inspired them and they say was responsible for their success is a very uplifting feeling.
Ball State's Board of Trustees hired Jeffrey Mearns in the spring of 2017 to serve as the 17th president of the university.
Yeah, so I was attracted to Ball State because of the fundamental strength of the institution. We're nearly 100 years old and have a long history of producing outstanding graduates, of transforming their lives, empowering them to serve others, to serve their communities, to advance their families, and to advance our country. And so I was attracted to the strength of the institution, and what I've discovered is that the institution is even stronger than I had anticipated during the process.
The students and their academic offerings lie at the heart of Ball State's educational experience. Beginning as a one-building division of Indiana State in 1918, with a single college and a handful of departments serving a few hundred students, Ball State transformed to a university with 8 colleges, 190 undergraduate majors, and 140 graduate programs, serving over 22,000 students.
I think in the future, we will continue to be on the forefront of academic innovation. We see it in many of our programs. We see it in our commitment to the expansion of immersive learning, but we also will remain grounded in those enduring values that are represented by beneficence and that are articulated in that beneficent pledge. Those enduring values will not change. They still define this university.
Ball State's student curriculum blends traditional academics and scholarly research with applied experiential learning projects dedicated to connecting students with the community.
From knowing what I know about not just its reputation, but where it's leading, I'm just so impressed that it continues to respond to today's needs.
Ball State's research efforts continue to connect students and faculty with national endeavors, including the Human Performance Lab's work with NASA and the Department of Defense, the Center for Middletown Studies' continued exploration of Muncie as a typical American city, being classified as a community-engaged university from the Carnegie Foundation, and top rankings for many programs and initiatives.
They continue to make our educational experience distinctive here at a public research university. A commitment to excellence, a commitment to character and integrity, a commitment to respecting all people.
Ball State's alumni, almost 178,000 living individuals, apply the knowledge gained from their academic experiences in many different professions. As the university celebrates the centennial anniversary, the students remain at the center of Ball State's mission and will continue to serve as the primary focus for the next 100 years. Ball State University remains committed to our students, our faculty, Muncie, and Indiana. Through research, education, professional development, service, and community engagement, Ball State continues its legacy of innovation and beneficence into the 21st century.
After 25 years of being a professor here, I've seen the number of students that I have had in the classroom change 3 times. Changes in the K-12 system, changes in the economy have adjusted the way students prepare for college. Because of their changes, I've had to make myself more open and willing to serve.
Having gone to college and graduated, if I had not done that, I would have been a different person. So having that as something that I accomplished was huge for me, as well as being a guiding vision toward what I wanted to do and how I could get there.
Today, I think what I think makes Ball State unique and great is something that's been around since actually back in 1961. When I came to Ball State, in spite of how things were in the country and the community, I found Ball State to be a very friendly kind of place.
At a university, you have presidents come and go. There's been 17 presidents in the 100 years of Ball State University, and certainly a lot of faculty members have come and gone. But students come here and they eventually graduate and become alumni. And the alumni are always around. They never leave. They're kind of like the soul of an institution. So they represent the past, but they also think about the future of the university. I came to appreciate the alumni and their passion for Ball State University as something that is absolutely necessary and important for it to continue to evolve.
The centennial anniversary of Ball State allows us to pause and proudly recognize 100 years of our history. From a small one-building teachers institute to a major university, the journey serves as a reminder of our legacy of excellence. As we look forward to the next 100 years, Ball State will continue to lead in innovative education, experiential learning, and will stay committed to our students' learning experience.
One, two, 1, 2, 3.